But eventually it gets down to the nitty-gritty. And what it's really based about or on is how they can use the paranoia of the public. You understand how you see, we think in a linear fashion. You understand? We truly think in a linear fashion. Those who work in the military-industrial complex are non-linear. The guys at the real top of it are non-linear. It's no different than the behaviorists who go to the marketers or work for the marketing companies, and you go with a problem. We can't get the customer to buy this particular product. And they'll figure a way to treat you or observe you like an animal. What makes this animal tick? Well, we'll make them go for this item by encouraging this, and this, and then they'll go for that item. And you'd never ever dream up, you could never imagine yourself with your linear thinking how it's done till it's explained to you. Well, this article from one of the universities here was how to use the people in the public's paranoia about the surveillance society and those who are involved in conspiracy theories. It's quite amazing. I mean, the very fact that they're obviously calling anyone in any group that questions this intensive surveillance conspiracy crazies, you know. But they're saying, how can we use this force and turn it to our advantage? And so the rest of his thesis is how you can actually do that for the intelligence services. That we'd never dream of this. We never dream of the day your own anger or disgust at what's happening could be used against you. You remember the movie George Orwell's 1984? You see the process of the torture of Winston, the character in it, by O'Brien. And every so often they take you to this scene where they come to a door and there's a big field and the hill and all that. And it's really nice. And O'Brien tells him, as Winston praises him, that you're the most wonderful person. And O'Brien says, yes, I am. And here he says, this is my world. If I say I can fly, I can fly. And of course Winston would have to agree with him. If I say 2 and 2 is 5, then it's 5. And whatever I say, being a representative of Big Brother, whatever I say is therefore reality, and you better believe it as reality. They use your own weaknesses against you. Whereas the weakness to please a master when you're under torture, whereas it's intense psychological studies, as I'm saying, and that's all used against us. There's nobody been more studied and monitored on this planet. Forget all the insects and little cuddly animals and all the nature shows. We were studied for thousands of years. And even more intensely, since they created anthropology and all the rest of it, and zoology as well, and all the other ologies that go along with it to study mankind himself. But when the behaviorists got into the act with their study of humanity, and they could prove it, they could prove their studies worked as opposed to the regular therapy psychology that goes all the way into the New Age now, the behaviorists have a different thing. They can prove it by studying and film shows of actual experiments, and you can actually see how they work with people. They know how everyone ticks. They know it. They know that a spontaneous leader doesn't come out of a crowd. It's a very, very, very rare thing. You can sit in a doctor's office, and I've seen these in psychology videos, and you'll hear someone getting beat up next door. A woman, for instance, she's screaming and screaming. It's only once in a blue moon that a person will actually get up and go and investigate. They all sit and look at each other, and then some of them get ashamed and they walk out and so on. They know human nature. They understand human nature. When they read about these little events in the media, so-and-so raped in broad view of 100 passers-by, they're not surprised at all as to how we react to things. They've done repeated experiments on the public in every possible situation. Every possible situation. And they know how you react. They actually have teams out there, you know, working with universities, with intelligence agencies, who will target certain individuals with strange emails. They'll have the personality profile of the person, what they're interested in, and so on, and the person might be tempted to open that email, even though it's a strange one, it's a strange name or whatever, and they'll open it up and get a little bit fascinated. They can actually play a game with you and run you around in circles. and get you to do all odd kind of things, and then monitor your email going in and out to everybody else at the same time, because they give themselves permission to do that, you see. They play with us. They play with us like rats in a cage in a laboratory. And very few of the public really know that. See, if you really do know that, you don't play their games. You don't use all their Facebooks and all the rest of the stuff they throw out for you. You don't help them. Most people know that on one level, in an intellectual level, but they go ahead anyway. Quite fascinating. Quite fascinating. I'm sure they've never worked down to the averages and the percentages of how many people will actually wisen up to this and leave it alone. They probably have all those studies completely completed long ago. But that's the kind of world we're in. We have no freedom whatsoever. And really, in a sense, if they could have had this 100 years ago, this technology, they would have used it then in just the same way and gone the exact same way with it. Because those at the top live in utter paranoia of all of you. And no wonder, if you knew what they're up to and how they've plundered you. Back after this break. Hi folks, this is Alan Watt and we're cutting through the matrix. I mentioned that enemy of the state before. Now people should really see that and watch it 2 or 3 times. Because it was done back in the 90s, and it showed you at that time what they were already really doing. The equipment which they showed in the movie was actually used and been used for a long time, many years by the NSA. And they could go into your bank account and put money in it, and then put reports in the paper you were embezzling and stuff like that. They do that kind of stuff all the time when they target someone, set you up. And you're in the newspapers, you're suddenly disgraced, someone they want out of the picture. And that happens all the time. They all do this too. Britain does the same thing as well. And also the movie Brazil, a comedy satire of the future, which is now. It was written again, it was done back in the 80s, I believe, by some of the guys from the Monty Python crew. And in a comedy form, they show you this massive bureaucratic society, a world society, where the biggest building is at the Department of Information Retrieval, and heavily guarded, of course, and the different class structure that works within it, and then the ordinary folk down below at the bottom. But it goes through an awful lot of this, especially when the movie itself starts off with a SWAT team coming through a roof to kill someone. And it's because a fly, and this is how they do it in the comedy, a fly had got into the telex machine and a B turned to a T, and Tuttle ended up getting assassinated, and then they tried to cover up their mistakes. Well, you see, science fiction writers were writing back in the 50s what would happen in this computerized society that they talked about was coming up. People and non-persons, as I say, if you're not fully in it, you don't exist, you know. But also, the people getting convicted all the time or accused or put on databases by mistake, and you can never get off of it. Never mind just the no-fly list. And lots of folk are on that. Even babies are on that, by the way, and they can't get them off. Once you're on, that's it. From the Mail Online in Britain, the innocents are branded as yobs and perverts in crime records blunders. 14th of April 2010, 7 innocent people a day are falsely branded criminals because of bungled records checks. They're wrongly accused of being pedophiles, thugs, fraudsters or drug addicts, potentially ruining their reputations and their careers. In many cases, misleading information has been disclosed to schools, hospitals, nurseries or charities. Over the past 6 years, the Criminal Records Bureau has been forced to admit making mistakes in almost 15,000 cases. It is now paying compensation at a rate of £290,000 a year. That's for the ones who got the money to fight them and get off the list. Last night, campaigners said the scale of the errors was typical of the lackadaisical approach ministers have to personal data. You're going to understand too, and that's true, and all the agencies that deal with the data now, security agencies, are becoming lackadaisical about it. They're just used to it all. So what? It's no big deal if someone gets falsely branded. That's it. It's just another statistic, and who cares, and they go on to something else. They warned that problems will worsen when the controversial Independent Safeguarding Authority begins vetting up to 9 million people who come into contact with children, including parents who want to help out at schools, sports clubs or youth groups. The scale of the controversy emerged yesterday following a Freedom of Information request to the CRB. This revealed that during the financial year 2008-9, 2,522 disputes handled by the agency were upheld. Once you're on them, though, they're generally there for life, folks. And you can't defend yourself. Brave new world, here we are. From Hamish myself in Ontario, Canada, it's good night to me. Your God or your gods go with you. Conspiracy crazies, you know. But they're saying, how can we use this force and turn it to our advantage? And so the rest of his thesis is how you can actually do that for the intelligence services. That we'd never dream of this. We never dream of the day your own eye makes this animal tick. Well, we'll make them go for this item by encouraging this, and this, and then they'll go for that item. And you'd never ever dream up, you could never imagine yourself with your linear thinking how it's done till it's explained to you. Well, this article from one of the universities here was how to use the people in the public's paranoia about the surveillance society and those who are involved in conspiracy theories. It's quite amazing. I mean, the very fact that they're obviously calling anyone in any group that questions this intensive surveillance, but eventually gets down to the nitty-gritty. And what it's really based about or on is how they can use the paranoia of the public. You understand how you see, we think in a linear fashion. You understand? We truly think in a linear fashion. Those who work in the military-industrial complex are non-linear. The guys at the real top of it are non-linear. It's no different than the behaviorists who go to the marketers or work for the marketing companies, and you go with a problem. We can't get the customer to buy this particular product. And they'll figure a way to treat you or observe you like an animal.